This video is going to show you the very basics of writing your own code for the Arduino. We're going to do that using a very simple blinking LED setup. To do that, I'm going to drag in a breadboard and an Arduino. And we're going to set up our electricity next. So I'm going to bring 5 volt to our positive. We're going to make that red so we know that's our hot. And then we're going to bring in a wire from our ground to our negative terminal there. Let's make that black so we know that's our ground. Let's kind of bring this over so we can see. Next, we're going to wire in an LED. And I'm just going to plop that here. And let's make it yellow today. I'm going to bring a red wire from my positive to my anode. And I'm actually going to use a resistor to bridge the cathode to our negative. And then we're done. If I were to turn the Arduino on right now, it's basically only functioning as a battery because it's sending electricity through the hot, through this part of the LED, and then looping back through and going to the ground. So the bulb would be lit continuously, and it would not be using any code. So let's use some code. Let's get rid of this, and let's use a jumper to go to the digital port number 1. I'm actually going to leave this green because it's not functioning as just a hot wire to me. It's actually going to be doing some different activities based on the control of the Arduino. So I'm going to leave it green to remind myself of that. Let's write some code with this. No, we don't want to use blocks. We want to use text. I'm actually going to get rid of all of this. There are actually 3 sections of Arduino code, and we're only going to use 2 of them. The first section is kind of a defining section where we could define some variables or other parts of it, and we don't have any variables in this setup, so we're going to skip that. Next, we need to tell the Arduino what we're going to be using. Okay. And its function. Okay. To do that, we type the word void space setup. With that setup, we need to open a parenthesis, but we're actually not going to do anything with that setup, so we just immediately close that right away. And then to tell the Arduino to do something, we're going to use the fancy open bracket. Okay. The only thing we have to tell it right now is that we're going to be using port number 1, this digital port number 1, as our output. It's going to be able to send electricity, send a signal there. So to do that, we're going to use pin mode. We open our parenthesis again, and for the digital ports, we just have to use the number, comma, space, and then all caps, we're going to tell it that that's going to be our output. We close our parenthesis, and then we add a semicolon. If I were using multiple points, I could repeat that pin mode command and say maybe 2 would be our input or something like that. But since we're not going to do that, I'm going to leave that off right now so we're not confused. Once we're done with that, we need to close our bracket, and we can just do that on another line. So our setup, and then we've got our setup language here between those 2 fancy brackets. Okay. The third section is our command loop, and that basically is going to go through each line of text we tell it to do, and then it's going to go, when it gets to the bottom, it goes back to the top and goes through that over and over and over again indefinitely. Very similar language. It's going to be void and a loop. Again, we're going to open and close those parentheses and then open with a bracket. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, since nothing's happening right now, is we're going to tell it that we want to make the state of that first pin to be a high power state, so it sends electricity and turns on our LED. To do that, we use the digital write command and open our parenthesis. We're using port number 1, comma, space, and we tell it that we want it to go to a high power state. Close our parenthesis and add our semicolon, and then we can close out our bracket. And that's all it's going to do. So we can test that now by starting our simulation. And when we do that, we should be able to see that our bulb is lit up all the way. I'll drag this over a little bit so I can leave the code open while it works. So it turned on. That's kind of boring. So let's turn it off now. Same command here, digital write, open parenthesis, port number 1, comma, space, all caps, low, close parenthesis, and semicolon. Let's start that simulation. Well, you can see that it really only looks like the bulb is a little bit dimmer than it was before. Why is that? Well, because it's rapidly turning it from a high-powered state to a low-powered state, and then looping back and doing that over and over again. There's no way for us to see it blinking because there's no delay. So let's add in a delay. Do that with the command delay, and then whatever we put in these parentheses will be considered milliseconds. So let's just go with 500 milliseconds for now. Close our parenthesis and add a semicolon. So let's start the simulation and see what happens now. Okay, we're back to the bright LED, but why is it not turning off? Well, again, it's turning it on in a high-powered state. It's delaying for 500 milliseconds, and then it's going to turn it off, but then immediately it goes back to the beginning of our loop and it goes back to a high-powered state. So of course we have to add another delay after that. So let's delay it 1000 milliseconds this time and add in our parenthesis and our semicolon and see what happens. So we should turn on and then off for twice as long. Okay, and we have a blink because it's going through those 4 commands. If we wanted to do something fancier, we could simply copy those. And let's actually make it so that it's on and off for 500 and then on and off for 2000. Start that simulation. We should have a short blink, short off, then a longer on and longer off. And it will do that indefinitely as long as we have that going. We could write a lot more lines and have it blink a Morse code or something every time that happens. But a very simple way of coding with some very simple language and commands. It's very important that you get all the syntax right with your parentheses, your semicolons, and spaces. That's just something that you have to pay attention when you're writing your own code.